Hello everyone, in previous video we introduced an important fact of a sine and cosine. Let's write down here. So sine, remember this square meaning same as this. Just basically square of the value of sine theta. Whatever the angle you use, you can use this one. And remember, this must be the same angle. If you're talking about like this is 45 degree, but this 30 degree, we're not talking about the same thing. For the same angle, sine theta, sine square, cosine square is always equal to what? Yes, equal to 1. So this is the most important fact. We're going to use this. So let's check this example here. The first example is we have an angle. This also a Greek letter called alpha has a terminal ray that falls in the second quadrant. Okay, let's underline the key information. If we know sine alpha is 3 over 5, then we need to determine the value of cosine. So we know sine. How do we find out the cosine? We are going to use this one. So some students might wonder, can I use right triangle to figure it out? The reason we can't, just because the random angle here is not just limited to the angle in the right triangle. So that's why this, since it's identity, we can always use this one to whatever the angle we're talking about. So let's plug in the value here. Since this question use letter alpha, so I'm going to use alpha. So it looks like a 2, so that's why I write a little bit crazy here. Cosine square. So this is equal to 1. Now we just need to plug in the value here. I know sine alpha is 3 over 5, so it's 3 over 5 squared. And this one we don't know that yet, so I'm going to keep this way equal to 1. Okay, so now let's just figure out the answer. What is this answer? Is top square, bottom square, so it's going to be 3 times 3, 9, 5 times 5, 25. We still don't know that. And also remember, you can consider the whole value as x here. So in order to solve this one, we need to minus. So some student might say, I don't like fraction, it will drive me crazy. You can use calculator, but one thing I want to remind you, once the original value has a fraction or sometimes has a radical sign there, then your answer should keep this consistent way. You can use calculator to find the decimal and then convert it to a fraction, but let's quickly write down the sign notes. 1 minus 9 over 25. So when you see the whole number subtract the fraction, you can always convert to the same denominator. So 25 over 25 is 1. The reason I use 25 just because this is 25. 25. So when we have a same denominator, we can just subtract the numerator, which is 25 minus 9. It's going to be 16 over 25. Okay, but remember, we need to find the cosine. So in order to find that, I'm going to find the square root of this. So it seems that cosine alpha is going to be, when we square root of this, it's going to be square root of numerator and square root of a denominator. So it's going to look like this. So it's going to be 4 over 5. If you stop here, I would say be careful. The reason is, remember, I highlight one information here. The angle, the terminal ray is around here. If it's around here, remember, cosine, the definition for cosine, whatever the theta is actually in unit circle, by the way, is x. So for cosine, the second quadrant is negative, and third quadrant is always negative because on the left side of axis is negative value. So that's why for this answer, we need to explain this answer as negative. So let's rewrite the answer here. But how do we, keep the answer consistent. So that's why in this step, I do not just put a square root, I put plus minus, because it can be positive, it can be negative. When you square a value, it can always become positive. So when you go back to square root, it should be positive and negative. But the final answer tells us this is second quadrant. So that's why the answer is only negative. So that's why this should be our answer. So the terminal ray is in quadrant 2. So cosine alpha is only negative. Sorry, it's kind of crowded here, put everything here. But it's one thing I want to remind you is before you write down the final answer, always go back to check the terminal ray, where the terminal ray is, and then you're going to determine it's going to be negative or positive. Okay, one more example, then we are finished. So an angle theta is first quadrant, and then cosine theta, we know that. Now we need to find the sine theta. So again, remember the most important thing for this is we have that. Okay, so let's write it down. So first we know, equal to 1. Now we just plug in whatever the value we know. This is 1/3. Okay, we do the calculation. 1/3 square is numerator square. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 squares. 3 square is 9. And then equal to 1. So in order to find this, we need to just solve like a regular equation. Write down the side notes. 1 minus 1 over 9 is 9 over 9. 1 minus this. So 9 minus 1 is 8 over 9. Okay, now remember, so I'm going to write here so we have more space here. When we find, in order to find sine, you need to find the square root of both sides. So once we find square root of this, it's going to be sine theta. So it's going to be, remember, we need to focus on the positive and negative here. But since the terminal ray is in first quadrant, so sine theta, remember, the first quadrant, everything is positive, so sine theta is only positive that. So you may wonder, are we finished? Sorry, we're not, because we said in simplest radical form. What does that mean? That means we're going to simplify that. So it's radical 8 over radical 9, which is 8 radical 8 and 3. But for this one, again, let's write down the side note. So radical 8, if you do remember, we did simplify this before. I break down this as perfect square number 4 times 2. So it is become radical 4 times radical 2. What is radical 4? Which is 2. So the top one, the simplified answer should be this. Now let's write down the final answer. So sine theta is 2 radical 2 over 3. And this is our final answer. So several things I want to remind you. So first, we need to set up equation. Let's quickly just summarize 2 examples here. Solve like a regular equation. Just like when we subtract the number to isolate the variable and determine the sign, determine it's going to be positive or negative. Remember, the key information is where terminal ray is. Last, simplify the answer. basically, you know, no matter we ask a simplest form or not, we always prefer to simplify the answer just because whenever we deal with radical, it's always a good idea to simplify this, okay? So that's it. That's the two examples I will show you. I hope this video is helpful. You're always welcome to ask me any questions if you get stuck at some point, okay? Everyone, stay healthy, stay safe. See you soon.